Welcome in, one and all. I apologize for being away for the last week or so. I've been sick. If you're in Melbourne, I'm sure you know someone who's got that cough going around. Boy, howdy, does it linger. But I think I finally kicked it, and hey, that's life. You bear the mark of Nurgle, you get a gift from the grandfather every now and then. But while the old throat's been out of commission, the ears have been working well. So, I've been listening, and today, I'd like to talk about a new band for me called Sellsword. They are a English power metal band. They've just released their third album, With Might and Vengeance. It's a cool album name. And this was brought to me by the Facebook algorithm. This kept coming up as an advertised post in my reels. I'm doom scrolling and I keep getting this band appearing in my doom scrolling. And I have a natural aversion to being advertised too, so I was just like, skip, 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 get out here. I don't want to see it. But they cracked me eventually. I'm like, alright, does sound kind of cool. And their live footage looks pretty fun. I'll check out the album. And I'm glad I did. Now, being a power metal band, they are contractually obligated to also sing about fantasy themes. So the album kicks off with a nice, longer, 90-second symphonic introduction. And I know this year especially, I've been very lukewarm on long album intros, but I feel this one's earned. Fantasy metal bands can have a long fantasy intro to their albums. It's just right, it needs to be there. Having your intro track be the title track is a bold choice, because then you don't get to have, the title track for the album be something you can present to people as, a song, or, a thematic anchor of the album. The first actual song, Bringers of War, rolls in, and look, I'll touch on it, but it's an okay opening. But the step up to the second song, third track, Saxon Steel, is so large that I am just left perplexed why you wouldn't open with Saxon Steel. If I was going to recommend any track to anyone, it would be Saxon Steel, and, there's my recommendation. Go listen to that song. So I don't know why you don't just put your best foot forward and just grab people with that. You're putting so much money, apparently, into this advertising budget to keep hammering people on social media. You may as well put your best song at the very front so that, those goddamn doom scrollers with their terrible attention spans, you're grabbing them right at the front. Don't make them wait bloody 8 minutes in the album before your best song. Don't do that. Put it right at the front. The only realistic reason I can think of having it as the third track would be pacing. Probably works better coming after Bringers of War. Otherwise, Bringers of War is a bit slower and then leads into an even slower. It kind of starts fast and then really winds down, whereas, starting good and then really launching up and then slowing down to a nice, tough, slow one. That's probably better pacing for the album. But that point aside, the first element that I really clocked on Bringers of War is the keys. Those real ephemeral, floaty keys, that kind of fey harpsichord sound. It is the MSG of fantasy metal. I love it. As an Australian, it reminds me a lot of Valhalla. I think both bands use that sound to great effect to just add the magic into the universe. And on that front, there's kind of orchestral elements as well, especially the orchestral songwriting style really drives the music forward. And I think that's really important for a fantasy metal band. If you think of all your best fantasy series, your books, your movies, they're not stagnant settings. They are a cool setting, but in a live setting. They've got a story happening, and the story in the world is more important than the world itself. So I think it's really important to have that drive to feel like we are progressing and going somewhere throughout this album. I think it's a death knell to have fantasy metal songs that just kind of don't go anywhere. I think all the fantasy metal bands I hate suffer from that. So the orchestral elements really drive the songs forward. Other elements, the other instrumentals, and even the lyrics could actually probably pick up the slack. It's not entirely without direction, but some of the songs are, if I can be blunt about it. I think it could do with a bit more narrative, even if not overarching, even within individual songs, more narrative would benefit the songs. That being said, while they're not always driving the song forwards, the guitars are phenomenal with some of the most beautiful guitar solos. Another thing that in the past I've been like, don't include them if you don't need them. But for power metal especially, you really just want to show off your chops with a absolutely blistering guitar solo every now and they do that for sure. I don't think they overdo it. I don't think there's, a really showy guitar solo in every track. I think that's an ace up their sleeves, and they only play it when they need to. But as I said, after Saxon Steel slows down a bit, goes into Warwolf, and when they start hitting that lower BPM, I'm reminded a lot of Grand Majors, and I love Grand Majors. The last album I compared to Grand Majors was Axe Dragger, and that's been one of my best albums of 2026 so far, so I don't compare things to Grand Majors lightly, alright? And when it hit that "Witness My Power" lyric in the track, I'm like, bam, straight to the gym playlist, baby. Witness My Power. Another band that it's reminded me a lot of, and I do have a gap in my listening experience for right now, is Turasas. I've had that gap for over a decade now. They just kind of released Turasas 2012 in 2012, and then ghosted. But this mercenary motif of Sellsword, especially with the track Mighty Mercenaries, I think really, is filling that for me in the fantasy sense of like, oh, cool mercenary band. You can kind of tell different stories when you're mercenary. You can tell a lot of different stories without having to keep on like a straight narrative arc. But they also just hit that same blend of jaunty fun while keeping it a little bit more serious. And that creates a nice range of moods on display as, it rolls from the more fun Mighty Mercenary into a slower, almost ballad track with Reignite the Flame. It never feels jarring, it just kind of rolls really smoothly through these different pacings and different moods. One element I've really loved on this album is the vocal clarity. Again, another just key fundamental foundation of good power metal, especially in this fantasy power metal subgenre, is vocal clarity. If you're telling me a story and I can't hear the story because the mix is shit, then why even bother writing the lyrics? You need a good vocalist who can project themselves, come through really clearly, and then it needs to be mixed well so that the audience benefits from that, and Sellsword have nailed that fundamental perfectly. And then, as a knock-on of that, I can then invest myself in the songs. I know what's going on. I'm engaging with it. There's a point there, I'm not even sure how I feel on this right now, where I wish that the vocalists had more range, but my perception is skewed by vocalists in power metal like Dragon Force's original vocalist ZP Theart, or bloody Angus McWhatever his name is from Glory Hammer, the original one, where they were really good vocalists and they've kind of set a standard in the genre, but they haven't been able to keep up with their own standard because they really strained themselves. And that means they put out really good albums and then have literally both been removed from their bands over the years and just couldn't deliver live what they did on record. So part of me is like, do I just think this is lacking range because my perception is skewed by these people who push themselves to a range that could never be kept up? I don't know. Sellsword's vocalist is good, and by not straining himself, he's going to be good for decades, I'm sure. But part of me is just like, I just wish there was a little bit more range. And I think it comes in, especially in the later half of the album, particularly in the last track, Age of Night. But I wish it was throughout the entire thing. It's probably my only note on the vocals. And that's probably a matter of just walking a fine line of never stop training, never stop improving. You're never too far into your journey as a vocalist to go see a vocal coach. And on the other hand, don't strain yourself, don't blow yourself out. You want to do this for the rest of your life because I'm sure it's absolutely awesome to get up on stage and, belt out these amazing songs. So, balance. And as we get deeper into the second half of the album, I start to think that the songs could possibly be a little shorter. You know, they do feel large, and that complements the longer song lengths. But yeah, it's an hour-long album, and any hour-long album, I think you begin to feel that length in the later half. So when I'm on like New Gods and Hall of Heroes, that's when I'm start looking at my watch, being like, "Oh man!" And honestly, I think the three tracks that sit in that kind of 6 to 7 minute bracket are the three weakest tracks on the album. Bringers of War, New Gods, and Hall of Heroes. They're not bad songs, but I think they're the weakest. So they could probably do with just getting a little bit trimmed off them. And now I've tried to be very good up until this point and not heavily compare them to any other power metal band, especially not my go-to fantasy metal band, Glory Hammer. But when I saw that this album ends on one really long song, and then I listened to that song, and it's structured the same way that kind of all the Glory Hammer album enders are, because they always do that. They end on a really big, epic narrative song, filled with all these different breaking points and, you know, elements like voiceovers. It really had me thinking of like, oh, yep, this feels like a Glory Hammer album wrapping up, which isn't a bad thing. Again, love this band to death. And I don't think the two are entirely comparable. As I kind of alluded to before, I think Sellsword sit comfortably between the more fun and campy metal bands like Katurisas or Glory Hammer, and bridge that to the legends of the genre like Blind Guardian that are a little bit more straight face with it. And because of that, I could really recommend this to any power metal fan. I think it sits so perfectly either side of the fence that if a band did this and screwed it up, I would say that they're fence sitters that need to pick a side. But there is just so much balance in with Might and Vengeance that no, it rides the line perfectly. And for that, yeah, highly recommend this album. I highly recommend jumping on board Sellsword right now. Just those points that I've mentioned that are kind of holding it back a little bit to me, they are not points that cannot be overcome. So, in my mind, this is an awesome album, but something's telling me it's not their magnum opus, not yet. So I'm really keen to now follow Sellsword into the future. Excited about what they're doing now. I'm excited about With Might and Vengeance. But also, I'm really interested to know what they can do in the future. And speaking of adventures, thank you for joining me on this little adventure into this album and new band brought to me by the glorious algorithm that controls our lives now. I hope you like it, and if you're not listening to this, I hope whatever you are listening to brings you a lot of joy, because music is awesome and brings so much joy to the world. All the YouTube stuff, like, share, subscribe. Now that I'm recovered, and I'm barely going to have to edit out any coughs, I thought I'd still have to, cut a few ones out, but I've made it easier on myself on the editing side. So, until next time, keep well, listen to good music, and I'll see you in the next one.